Hi, Atonement family. I am going to read you a book for Black History Month. This book is called Climbing Lincoln's Steps. I usually read this to the third grade class around President's Day, which is also in February. This book is written by Suzanne Slade, and it is illustrated by Colin Bootman. Abraham Lincoln was a great leader. When he became president in 1861, many African Americans were enslaved, but Abraham knew slavery must end. So this is starting out at the beginning of Abraham Lincoln's presidency, and so we're seeing slaves working on a plantation. Abraham led America through dark days when citizens in the North fought those in the South over slavery and other issues. Over 600,000 Americans died in the bloody battles of the Civil War. Abraham had to find a way to end slavery and unite the country he loved. He spoke out with brave, honest words that called for freedom for all. In 1863, Abraham boldly stepped forward for change when he signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This important document freed thousands who were enslaved. So we're seeing the Civil War when we had the North fighting the South, so people were fighting other people in their own country. And then in the background, we see President Lincoln signing his proclamation. Years passed, but Abraham was not forgotten. In 1914, Americans decided to build a statue in his honor in Washington, D.C. This 19-foot masterpiece was created from 28 smaller pieces carved out of white marble, each one carefully chiseled before they were put together like an enormous puzzle. The statue was unveiled to the public in 1922 in a building called the Lincoln Memorial. Since then, many people have climbed the steps leading to Abraham's statue, inspired to take another step for change. So the Lincoln Memorial was built before the statue was built. The statue was added a little bit later. Fun fact, if you look on a penny and you look really, really close and it's a really new shiny penny, you can see a teeny tiny statue of Lincoln in that penny. It's 1939. Pitter patter, children in their finest clothes gather near Abraham's steps. Click, click, click. Women follow close behind, coats buttoned tight against the cold spring air. Clomp, clomp. Men in felt hats and freshly shined shoes stand by marble steps. People of all colors stream towards the Lincoln Memorial. Many more assemble in the sprawling yard. 75,000 people gather together. They've all come to hear the famous opera singer Marian Anderson. Marian had been welcomed by kings and queens around the world. She'd performed in stately palaces and the finest concert halls, but she wasn't allowed to sing at Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C. because she was Black. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt spoke up. She said Marian should sing at the Lincoln Memorial. And so this is a picture of everybody that came to see. This would be the view that Marian is seeing. We're going to see her on the next page. This is part of the National Mall in Washington, D.C. This is the reflecting pool. And then at the other end from the Lincoln Memorial is the Washington Memorial. You can't see it. You can kind of see it like in the crack of this page, the Lincoln or the Washington Memorial. And way in the background, you can see the Capitol building. And then this would be the view of the crowd seeing Marian Anderson on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. That Easter Sunday, Marian's heart pounded wildly as she took her place on top of Abraham's steps. When she began to sing, the thunderous crowd fell silent. My country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, to thee we sing. Land where my fathers died, land of our pilgrims' pride. The sound of change floated through the fresh April air as Marian sang the song Abraham had held in his heart. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. This is broadcast on national radio. That's what we're seeing on this next page. Microphones carried Marian's magnificent voice over the crowded lawn and into the thousands of living room radios across the country. As her voice rose in song, Marian lifted the nation to new heights of understanding. That skill and talent had nothing to do with the color of a person's skin. When the song ended, people cheered. others wept with joy. And it's okay because sometimes you are so happy and you're so emotional that sometimes you cry, but it's not because you're sad. It's because you're just so happy and you're so overwhelmed with emotion. But Americans were still separated on buses, in restaurants, and even in schools. Change. It happened slowly, one step at a time. So we see how there's people listening to Marian Anderson, and that was a big step, but there's still work to do. And so now we can see that people are being separated. This is a picture of a diner. It's 1963. People of all colors traveled by bus, train, and plane to Washington, D.C., again, where the Lincoln Memorial is. 200,000 marched for miles, eager to hear the famous speaker, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so they're showing all the different ways people are traveling: bus, train, plane, automobile, marching. Pitter patter, children gather. Click, click, click. Women follow close behind. Clomp, clomp. Men walk toward Abraham's steps. On that hot, sticky August afternoon, Martin shared his dream that one day all Americans would be treated equally. He called for a brighter future where his children would be judged by their character, not by the color of their skin. And so this would have been the view of the crowd because it's showing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on the steps. We don't see a picture of his view in this book. Martin's dream echoed across the lawn and crackled over millions of televisions. People listened to the peaceful man with a powerful dream. The same dream Abraham had held in his heart. Martin's speech inspired a nation. Minds opened. Attitudes changed. People united. Just like with Marian Anderson, we're going to see that's not it. So here are people watching Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech on the TV. Soon, new laws were passed, and it became illegal for hotels, restaurants, and other public places to turn away Black people. Everyone was to be given an equal opportunity to buy or rent a house. Businesses could not decide who they hired or how much they paid workers based on race. Although some people didn't like the new laws, more and more Americans realized that everyone deserved equal rights. So here we have the president signing the proclamation or the amendment saying you can't separate people. You can't be prejudiced against people and say, I'm going to hire this person just because of the way they look or the way that they don't look, or pay them more or less based on how they look. That it shouldn't matter what you look like. It should matter on how good of a job you do. Change. It happens slowly, one step at a time, because that was a big change, but that doesn't mean that there's not still a lot of work to do it. So on this page, we have a lot of people who had famous firsts. So the first one that we see over here, this is Toni Morrison. She was a Nobel Prize winner in literature. She was the first African American to win the Nobel Prize in literature. She won it in 1993. Here we have Dr. Mae Jemison. In 1992, she became the first African-American female astronaut. Here we have Condoleezza Rice. And Condoleezza Rice, in 2005, she became the first African-American female Secretary of State. Here is Arthur Ashe, and there's actually a festival for Arthur Ashe in the fall. It's a tennis festival. He was, in 1975, he was #1 in the world for tennis. Here we have Oprah Winfrey, one of my favorites. In 1983, she became the first African-American female to host her very own talk show. Here we have Colin Powell, and in 2001, he became the first African-American Secretary of State. So he was the first African-American Secretary of State, and then Condoleezza Rice, later on in 2005, became the first female. And then, we have Andrew Young in 1977, he became the first Black ambassador, U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. It is 2009. Pitter patter, 2 children run up Abraham's steps. Click, click, click. A woman follows close behind. Clomp, clomp. One man slowly climbs the famous steps. The new family that is moving into the big white house a few blocks away, the same house where Abraham once lived, has come to visit. Maybe you can figure out who that is coming to visit Abraham's steps in 2009. The girls gaze in awe at the huge statue. Their father studies Abraham's determined face, knowing that although America has come far, there is still more work to be done. Standing together, the family remembers America's long journey. They remember the people who came before them, those who bravely pressed on and stepped forward for change. Then Barack Obama, America's first African-American president, and his family leave the Lincoln Memorial filled with hope. The same hope Abraham had carried in his heart, because change continues to happen one small step at a time. So just like climbing up steps, you don't go right from the bottom to the top. Steps are not like they're not like an escalator where you move gradually, but you don't have to do any work. They're not like an elevator where you go right from the bottom to the top. You have to take it one step at a time. And sometimes it's slow and sometimes it's really hard work. And then we have a little, an epilogue that comes at the end of a story that says Steps for Change. And it has a little bit more information about some other famous people who made big steps for change. It says millions of visitors climb Abraham's steps every year to see the statue of the great man who inspired change. Abraham took a major step toward change when he signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. But he knew many more would need to step forward to bring true equality and unity to America, which is something we're still working towards. Throughout our history, many courageous Americans have taken their own steps for change. Together, these brave people have helped create a better, stronger nation. Can you help make change happen? And the answer for all of us is yes. We can all do something to help move progress forward. And so we have Sojourner Truth. She took a step when she boldly spoke out for equality for all. Many years after being freed from slavery, Isabella Baumfree changed her name to Sojourner Truth. The word sojourner means traveler. In 1843, she set out across the country to teach others the truth she lived by, that all people should be treated the same. During her travels, Truth was arrested, threatened, and harassed, but she never stopped teaching. Whenever she spoke, many people gathered. In 1864, Truth met with Abraham Lincoln at the White House. Truth worked for 40 years for the rights of Black Americans and women. We have Frederick Douglass on the next page. Frederick Douglass took a step when he wrote and taught about the evils of slavery. Douglass escaped from slavery in 1838 by hiding on a ship bound for New York. A few years later, he gave a speech about the horrors of slavery. His speech was so moving that Douglass was invited to speak at other gatherings. In 1845, he published a book about his life as a slave. This powerful narrative convinced many people that slavery was terribly wrong. People who still supported slavery became angry and threatened Douglass, but Douglass did not back down. He continued to write and speak out against enslaving others. And in third grade right now, we're working on our personal narrative unit. So when it says he wrote a narrative, that means he wrote a true story about his life when he was a slave. Then we have Jackie Robinson, another one of my favorites. Jackie Robinson took a step when he showed the world true team spirit. When Robinson accepted the Brooklyn Dodgers' invitation to join their team in 1947, he knew it wouldn't be easy to be the first African-American baseball player in the major leagues, and he was right. Fans threw food at him and called him terrible names. Hotels refused to give him a room and restaurants wouldn't serve him. But Robinson patiently endured the jeering crowds and humiliation by focusing on the future. He exhibited great self-control, did not respond in anger, and continued to play great ball. Robinson's character and perseverance taught the world that everyone deserves to be treated with respect. And then we have Rosa Parks, who took a step when she fought against racial separation. On December 1st, 1955, Parks made a public stand for civil rights on her way home from work in the segregated city of Montgomery, Alabama. When a bus driver ordered her to give up her seat for a white passenger, Parks politely refused. Although she was arrested and lost her job, her bravery inspired the Black citizens of Montgomery to stop riding public buses for a year. This bus boycott ended in December 1956 when the United States Supreme Court said that Alabama's laws separating blacks and whites on buses went against the Constitution. The victory brought national attention to the civil rights cause. Parks later organized other boycotts and worked with the civil rights leaders such as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Her courageous actions led many Americans to see that racial separation was wrong. And that is the end of Climbing Lincoln's Steps, which I usually only get to share with third grade. And like I said, we usually read this for right around President's Day because Abraham Lincoln was a president and his birthday was in February. That's part of the reason we celebrate President's Day in February, but it's also Black History Month. And so I'm excited that I got to share this book with many more people than just third grade from our Atonement family. And I hope that one day maybe you will get a chance to visit Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, and maybe you will get to climb up Lincoln Steps and think about this book and think about all of the other people who have done important things at the Lincoln Memorial and all of the people that have taken steps for us to be where we are today. But then also think about what you can do, because even though there's been a lot of progress since Abraham Lincoln was president, there's still a long way to go. And like it said, what steps can you make for change? Every person can do something to help impact good in the world for your legacy when you are gone. So happy Black History Month, and I hope you enjoyed Climbing Lincoln's Steps.